Tom Odell. We were dating for a bit, then something rattled me. The singer-songwriter and his artist wife Georgina, on how their romance nearly went awry, domestic chaos, and why he quit Columbia Records. Written by Caroline Hutton, Wednesday, January, The Sunday Times. Tom. We met at a cafe in Kentish Town, and then for our first date, Georgie and I went for a walk on Hampstead Heath. It was January 2020, freezing and getting dark as we sat on a bench overlooking London with takeaway cups of tea going cold in our hands. But I didn't want to move. I'd never met anyone like her. It felt like seeing a color I'd never been aware of before. Our rapport was instant, and I was mesmerized. We'd been seeing each other for just a couple of weeks when something happened that rattled me completely. Georgie plays the violin in her spare time and is a member of the amateur North London Symphony Orchestra. I decided to surprise her by meeting her outside the rehearsal hall after the practice finished at 10 p.m. I took a bunch of flowers and waited while, one by one, the orchestra left the building. But there was no Georgie. Had she lied to me about going? I threw the flowers in a bin and texted her from a cab asking how her evening had been. When she replied, "Orchestra was great," I thought, have I got this all wrong? Have I been taken for a fool? I went home feeling very depressed. Later, Georgie came over, but I didn't say a thing about where I'd been. Then, as we were falling asleep, she mentioned she'd left practice early to go to her place to get changed before coming to me. My relief was so immense that I started to cry. That was the moment I realized I was in deep and never wanted to be without her. It took me 6 months to admit I'd been waiting that evening with flowers. When lockdown happened that March, she moved in with me. On November 25, the day between both our birthdays, I proposed to her on that same bench on Hampstead Heath, and we were married on the same date in 2023. Everything had aligned perfectly. When I saw her walking down the aisle, well, words fail me. That day was just wonderful in every way. I was in a tender place when we were first together. I'd been wondering for a couple of years whether I wanted to continue singing and songwriting at all. I was signed with Columbia Records, and it was a horrible situation. I felt as though they had written me off. I was feeling lost and plagued by self-doubt. One day, I played Georgie a load of music I'd been working on. Some was what I felt my record company wanted me to make. And there were a couple of tracks I knew they wouldn't like, just me and the piano, quite raw. Georgie said, "Those songs sound like you. You've got to do more like that." She'd reached out a hand and pulled me out of the dark place I'd been in creatively. After that, I left Columbia Records and now release my music as an independent artist. Like me, Georgie is driven by emotions, and she has alchemized those into beautiful pieces of art. It's helpful that we aren't working in the same fields. We're never competitive. We work hard every day in our separate studios. Having done it for a while longer than Georgie, I know the most difficult part is the most important. You have to cut your own path, make your own mistakes. It's a journey, and it takes bravery. Georgie is fearless, and I respect that deeply. I used to work 7 days a week, but now our weekends are spent together, walking on the heath, having a roast lunch, going to a gallery, or a gig. We unwind, discussing politics and making each other laugh. We have a small group of friends, but there's no one I want to spend time with more than my wife. You never know what's round the corner, but it's the relationships you form in life that make it worthwhile. Georgie is my best friend, and I am grateful to have had the opportunity to feel such love for her. It's the greatest feeling of all. Georgina. Tom and I were inseparable from the start. It was his mother's birthday soon after we started dating, and before I knew it, I'd met his entire family. We never had time for those conversations about when we might move in together because lockdown took our whirlwind relationship straight to the next stage. Very quickly, it felt as if we'd been together forever. We were both in a transitional stage of our lives in 2020, and working through some tricky decisions bonded us. We needed the same thing, to be true to ourselves. I'd been modeling, but had always known I wanted to be an artist. During lockdown, I worked on my art every day. Tom encouraged me. I enrolled at Goldsmiths in 2021 and completed my fine art degree last year. We've both flourished, and I don't know if that would have happened if we hadn't met. Tom is passionate not just about his work, but also endlessly curious about the world around him. We talk all the time about things we've seen or heard or watched. Sometimes he'll want to work late into the night. We're good at giving each other space. He meditates and exercises every day. I think it's admirable to be that disciplined and to understand what he needs to feel good about himself. One of the most valuable lessons Tom has taught me is the importance of treating the working week with absolute respect. Get up and go to the studio, even if some days that means I'm dragging my feet or spending a lot of the day staring at the wall. I like Picasso's quote, "Inspiration exists, but it has to find you working." I don't claim to understand how to create a song any more than Tom would know what to do with a welder in my studio, but I do know that his songwriting comes from a place below the surface. It's true that art can be a form of therapy. Tapping into vulnerable feelings in our work creates an openness in our relationship too. It helps that we're both good listeners and we never go to sleep before resolving a disagreement. I'd like to say I'm cooking for Tom every night, and he may claim that he's the cook, but in reality, whenever we have groceries in the fridge, they just go off. We're both messy. Our house tends to be in a state of chaos. I've always played the violin, and I love spending 3 hours a week at orchestra. It requires my full attention and clears my mind. The evening when Tom missed me leaving practice, I'd left early because I was so excited to see him. I didn't imagine he would go all that way and wait around in the cold to meet me. Who'd do that? He's as romantic today as he was that evening. Georgina Odell's show Childhood Souvenirs is at the Soho Review Gallery until February 8, sohoreview.com. Tom's 6th studio album, Black Friday, is out now. She loves to scare me, like hiding behind doors in the dark. If I die of a heart attack, it will probably be Georgie scaring me to death. Georgina on Tom. Tom chews the tops of pens, even metal ones. I feel sorry for his teeth. Written by Caroline Hutton, January 29, 2025. The Sunday Times.